Hello, my Culminators friends, and welcome to another edition of ColemanNation. I bring on again, I'm privileged to have my friend, colleague, and fellow, just, the list is too long of all the do lists that we're on together. Mm-hmm. Although I'm not sure I'm on all the good ones that Will's on. Will Chamberlain. Will, welcome back. How you doing?
Great. Good to be with you, Ron.
I think the last time we had you were pre-baby.
Yes.
Okay. You and I had lunch post-baby, I think, but
that's right. It?
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Or right around either. She might've been just very late.
She was going to come actually, right? Which would have been, yeah. But now you seem to be entirely in charge of childcare, right? What is she working in a factory or something?
Yeah, she's got an office job and I don't, which means that, you know, when the childcare center calls and says you need to take the baby, that responsibility ends up falling on me. So I'm currently she's in the yeah.
I'm sure it's the thing everyone agreed about you, Will, was that a little humility wouldn't hurt you, and being a stay-at-home dad, that'll do it.
It is. I mean, I saw a funny, there was a great Instagram clip where some guy was talking about, he's like, I've come to appreciate, I started doing the childcare because we had to, and changing diapers and feeding and, all the stuff that goes along with it. And, he's talking to his wife, and I came to realize, it just isn't very hard. It's just basic stuff is actually not that technically challenging.
No, not technically challenging. That is actually, in fact, the mechanics, notwithstanding the movies that seem to indicate dads being unable to. These are 80s movies, I guess.
Yeah.
Even my father, I'm sure, never changed a diaper.
Right.
And of course, in those days, diapers were far more disgusting. We're talking cloth diapers.
Yes, modern diaper technology is dramatically improved.
My wife, our babies had all had colic, every one of them. Mm-hmm. And first of all, you come to understand a lot better when you hear terrible, awful stories of people throwing babies out the window. But you realize if you were a drug addict or an alcoholic or a mentally marginal. I mean, a baby with colic can really get you thinking desperate thoughts, much less two at a time. But one time my wife woke up in the morning feeling great. Mm-hmm. And she said, "Wow, did the baby sleep through the night?" And she looked over at me and my pasty white, bags under my eyes, and she realized that I had taken care of everything during the night. That was one of the highlights of our marriage. It's the last time I think that she recalls that she thinks I really stepped up. So anyway, that was a while ago. Mm-hmm. All right, so Will, but from home, you seem to be still doing all kinds of things. You seem to be getting into the groove, and you're writing statements on the. I have to make sure I say this right. I forget what is it.
National conservatism.
National conservatism, right? Because all the adjectives. It's kind of like the German Democratic People's Republic. You have to get all these things right, or else you could be talking about the really exact opposite of what it sounds like. Yeah. So you seem to have gotten yourself involved with that crowd, and in fact, I'm going to be speaking with Josh Hammer later today. What's going on there?
Well, I mean, I've been involved. Yoram Hazony is the guy who's like the primary intellectual engine behind national conservatism. He wrote The Virtue of Nationalism, which I still think is an outstanding book and a really good exposition of, what a kind of new conservatism that's Trump friendly would look like from an intellectual perspective. And so I've been happy to help him in a number of ways, social media, various other things. And so, I did get involved, and
I've known Norm since college. Yoram since college.
Really, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I slept on when he was. How right wing is Yoram Hazony? He was married during college, and talk about a revolutionary act. And when I came back for my first reunion, I guess it was I slept on his couch over Shabbos because it was impossible to accommodate me otherwise. Anyway, we go way back. So yeah, okay. So you've been working with Yoram. So Yoram, all right, and Josh. Yeah, go on. This is like,
yeah,
a lot of people we know.
Josh. I think, gosh, I forget his name. I'm complete. David Brogg. Sorry, a few other people. They were more heavily involved in the drafting than me, but I think that their organization, they run a National Conservatism Conference every year. Regularly get very good speakers, like last year Peter Thiel, JD Vance, like all the good rock stars on our side are coming.
How about Rabbi Zupnik? Did you get to meet Rabbi Zupnik?
I did not meet Rabbi Zupnik. Hopefully I get to meet him in a couple months when we have the next conference.
He's my rabbi. He certainly brings a different perspective to the table.
But yeah, no, it was interesting. I read Yoram just came out with another book, Conservatism, a Rediscovery, and a big chunk of it is sort of an intellectual history of conservatism all the way back to England, Anglo-American conservatism. But like, I found the most interesting part to be like the last, 75 pages, which was just about his personal exploration of what it meant to lead a conservative life. And he talked about getting married very young, trying to avoid, looking at college as this just source of degeneracy and anti-family nonsense.
And this was in the mid 80s. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we had fun. All right. Mm-hmm. But compared to the hookup culture of the 21st century, not,
yeah. And I don't know, it's a really interesting challenge. I think,
one thing about the book that also makes it a challenge is that being a Zionist in a way that I'm not a Zionist, mm-hmm. he presses the point through the point of view of Zionism, which mm-hmm. is daring in more than one respect. Mm-hmm. But he does make it very, it does make it personal. And also, I think in many respects, I think he would argue, I'm sure he had a lot of discussions with a lot of people who would actually, he's very close to Rabbi Zupnik, which is why Rabbi Zupnik was at the meeting. Including that in many ways, I think, forces you to really see the issue in a way that's less comfortable than, oh gosh, I'm an American, so of course America. I'm French, I'm like, how about this nationalism? How about a nationalism which is really premised on something profound and controversial? And
right.
Do Jews have a right to nationalism?
Right. And I mean, I think, he's very strong on that stuff. I found, almost more interesting and personal was like his challenge to young conservatives to lead conservative lives. Right. Yes. Which I like read as like, oh, I am the audience for this, because what he's saying
because you're not getting dates anyway. So you may as well make it a virtue.
Right. Well, I'm married now, but so that's part of it, but that's certainly not all of it. There's, the challenge to like, he makes I'm non-religious, right? Like, I think we might have talked about this before. My mother is, Ashkenazi Jewish descent. My dad was a WASP, as WASP as you can get. Culturally, I feel like I identify more with my dad's side, if you will. Like, it's just kind of how I grew up. And as a result, most people don't even recognize that.
And it works out well. It works out well, yeah. Because, if you came out looking like me, it would be a little bit harder to explain,
right.
that inclination, but you have very little explaining to do.
Right. I look like a wasp. I behave like a wasp. So, but Yoram says something interesting. He's kind of like challenging you, like, okay, so I'm non-religious because, my parents didn't agree. And so they just kind of exposed me to everything, but indoctrinating me in neither. And I just,
and you end up with nothing, which is how it always goes.
Right. I end up with nothing. I'm like, it also, that actually is also the most elegant way to resolve that parental dispute, right? Rather than one of you is right, both of you are wrong. that is the null hypothesis. Like, you're both right that each of you isn't getting things accurate. Anyway,
except you're wrong. It's not the null hypothesis. The null hypothesis is a creator. Now the details on the other hand. Then again, both your parents agreed with. Well, at least their traditions agreed with that. Okay, please.
Right. They get along. But I guess that the interesting. So Yoram makes a very interesting challenge. He's like, okay, but you should. You talk about history and tradition, but you're not honoring the traditions of your ancestors if you're not, studying the Bible, respecting the Sabbath. And it's like, that's a really profound challenge to someone like me. And I'm like, okay, I'll listen to that. But I also have this sort of in the back of my mind, which is like, which tradition, right? Like which of my ancestors, right? Like, I got them going both ways and they do not agree. And it's like, so which way do I go? And how do I handle that dilemma? And how does, if it's
so
not
by getting married to some, you made that choice to some extent.
right. And I mean, I married, I suppose my wife might qualify as a non-practicing Protestant. I don't know. But it's not, her family isn't, I mean, they're religious, but not particularly so. I don't think they attend church. And I mean, I guess that would be one way to resolve the problem, but it's sort of, I think, the thing about Yoram's argument is that it's sort of it's an answer to the, well, I don't intellectually believe in the religion, right? And he's like, so what? Deal with it, right? Like your intellectualism is, disrespectful of tradition. But it's like, if I still have to choose, then that's still an intellectual choice.
Right. I mean, that aspect of it is definitely a complication. I mean, I keep harkening back in my mind of all the public figures that I could think of. I keep thinking of Churchill. Mm-hmm. Churchill was quite a religious skeptic. You would really be hard pressed to hear in him much reference at all to real Christian stuff. Mm-hmm. He's a man of his time. Mm-hmm. And yet for Churchill, it was obvious that one must be a Christian. Mm-hmm. An Englishman must be a Christian, and the Prime Minister of English, hell, even in Hogwarts they have Christmas, right? Right. There were just, even if you're not yourself, and I think this supports Yoram's argument, even if you yourself are not devout, mm-hmm. but you exist within a national tradition that includes a certain religion, it's good for everyone involved for you to respect that and live in a way that respects that. And your children will make the decisions that they will make ultimately. And if they see, dad used to go to church, but he wasn't really into it. I mean, and you've done what you can do. But right. To have this sort of, postmodern way of living where we're just all moving sideways and, people are hooking up and, and I know that that's not the only issue, but believe me, it's probably the main issue. Mm-hmm. Now, the other one is belief, and belief mm-hmm. is a gigantic deal because you can believe in the Creator, as you know, mm-hmm. right? You can look around and come to a conclusion and say, "Come on, this just doesn't," But that's a long way from saying revelation is true. Once you get right. revelation, the argument then between Christianity and Judaism is smaller than the argument between traditional Judaism and Reformed Judaism. Right. I mean, now it becomes much, much more interesting. Okay. That is an excellent segue, in fact, mm-hmm. for us to move away from nationalism to actually mm-hmm. a better, but listen to what a great segue this is. Shirtlift. The Boston City Hall flag case.
Okay, I'm not actually familiar with that, so I need to look that up.
It's going to ring a bell as soon as I tell you. The Boston City Hall was running flags. Anyone could submit a flag, and they would rotate everybody's flag. And then there's like a Christian flag. Mm-hmm. I don't really know who gets to decide what the Christian flag is, but some Christian group wanted them to fly a Christian flag, and they say, oh no, that's that's an establishment problem under the First Amendment. We won't do that. Meanwhile, mm-hmm. Pride flags and, baloney head flags and, whatever you could possibly think of, mafia flags. So they brought a lawsuit, goes up to the Supreme mm-hmm. Court, and the Supreme Court says, that is not an establishment problem for you. It's a viewpoint discrimination problem. Mm-hmm. If you're opening up the the flagpole, I guess actually mm-hmm. would be the metaphor. Instead of a metaphor, I'll be literal to every point of view and every symbolic mm-hmm. flag-worthy concept. You can't discriminate against religion per se, and that's what you're doing. Right. So that's good. That's obvious. It seems like a no-brainer. Along come the Satanists. Mm-hmm. And, the Satanists are just trolls. They're not really Satanists. They don't really believe in any of their really cool Satan stuff, which, by the way, would require them to believe in God, right? And they say, okay, well, here's our Satanism flag. And that's not been litigated, and I don't think it will be, because I think in Boston we'll probably be really happy to fly the Satanism flag. But I had heard my Michael Knowles. And Jeremy's wondering, gosh, Ron is so taken with this. Mike, you all know him, my faceless producer. Because he's heard me talk about it, because I'm fascinated by this. And Michael went on, I was, but the very few times when I was listening to a podcast, and he was saying, no Satanism. No, we're not going to fall for that troll. We're not going to say that just because we said you can't discriminate against religion, you may not discriminate against like nihilism or against something that represents the antithesis of free speech, or the antithesis of what our commonwealth is supposed to stand for. Mm-hmm. And he admitted that would not fly before the Supreme Court, but that's nonetheless a position that he thinks we should be prepared to take, that we should look to, and this is the common good kind of stuff, we should look to the traditions that we're living within, right? So now I'm ringing the bell with Yoram also, and flags, and saying, hey, wait a minute, we're not, what is it that the liberals used to say, that the Constitution is not a suicide pact, right?
Right.
What do you think? How would you answer that question?
I think that's the right that's the right stand to take. I think I don't know how the court would rule on it, but I think, our position, it's sort of like a bad faith pretext type argument, right? Like it from, if you imagine from like Fourth Amendment contexts, or if the pretext fails there, but like there are other places where, pretext and bad faith like matter. And you might just say it like, look, Satanism is a bad faith religion, right? Like in multiple senses.
Right. So this raises an interesting point, because generally in First Amendment litigation, the court never crosses the line of asking, I say never, I suppose a real expert would tell you, Ron, here's where they have. But I think by and large, you say that you sacrifice to Babaluaye, and Hialeah, won't let you sacrifice chickens. We're not interested. We don't want to know. Don't show us pictures. We believe you. But maybe there comes a point where just the problem is you can see why it's a good bright line from a policy point of view.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one. I think, but I think in general, I think that almost the real problem isn't Satanism and the sort of bad faith troll stuff. The sort of real problem is that, so
you're pro Satanism, right? We can use that in the excerpt here.
Funny.
The problem is
no, certainly anti-Satanism, but the real problem is that wokeness functions as a secular religion that isn't constrained by the Establishment Clause at all, right? Like that's the sort of, so basically, I remember reading Breyer's opinion in I think, what was it, Kennedy or maybe the Macon case, the Carson v. Macon. It was in one of, he wrote, I think he wrote both of those dissents.
And you are still reading Breyer dissents? I hope you're getting paid for that, because.
Well, there's only a few left. We won't be paid with those anymore.
There are only a few left. He wrote it and he just keeps using it in the same one, Yeah. All right, but I'm sorry.
But anyway, so his argument was like, look, we want this wall of separation, and it's important to keep this like very pristine, bright line between church and state. And I'm like, I don't necessarily agree, but whatever. It's a perspective, right? It's an ethic, okay? Except that you have this secular religion that is no restrictions at all, that's just dominated the public school system. Like there's no establishment of like drag queen story hour limits. Like, why not? There should be. There absolutely. Right. I think separation of drag queens and state would be nice. Thank you.
Right. So we really are coming on to a problem, right? Where this problem that Yoram talks about, and that all conservatives who aren't libertarians basically have to be aware of, and especially people who are attached to organized religion are particularly acutely aware of, is that we're coming around the other side to a world where there are ideologies that are every bit as faith-based and impervious to factual rebuttal as any religion. But they don't take the form of religions. And this, certainly critical racial theory and anything coming out of that.
Gender theory is the most obvious of this, right? Like it's literally all just non-falsifiable claims, right? Just nothing but non-falsifiable claims. like gender is a spectrum, unfalsifiable, right? You might say, oh no, there are only two genders. I'm like, but no. Like the way that they're defining gender, that's not a falsifiable claim, right? They're defining gender as the social construction about how people behave, right? So you can't falsify it and say that there aren't, multiple constructions or whatever. And like, think about like when they're asked to define what is a woman, what is a man, it's like when you ask a religious person to define God, right? Like just sort of this, indefinite, like expansive, thing that we're only seeking understanding of,
So a couple weeks ago, I had Eric Smith on, and I think in the last episode I called him Evan. But if anyone listens to 2 consecutive episodes, I've now fixed that. I'm sorry, I fixed it here. Oh, this won't be a consecutive episode, but really, really articulate and dynamic Black scholar. But he pointed out to me something, and again, I apologize to anyone who actually listens regularly because I just keep bringing this up, but sometimes it's just something just grabs you. He said one of the things you see from this entire school that comes out of Marcuse, really, they don't use adjectives. So you don't have trans women, you have women. Like you either accept our definition, we've moved the slider to wherever the hell we decide it is, and that's woman. So if someone shows up in a bathing suit and says, I'm a woman now, you may not say you're a purported woman, you're a make-believe woman, you're an aspirational woman, you're a woman, and we are going to enforce that, and we're going to change the meaning of what marriage is. We're going to change the meaning so that that, he says, he uses that as a technique to get people to understand what they are allowing to happen to their intellectual critical faculties in this modality. So now I guess maybe you could turn this on, and I think Justice Thomas brought this up in the oral argument over was it in the Flag case, or was it in the main public religious school ruling, where he asked, well, what if yes, it was in the main public school, Carson, where he said, is critical racial theory also maybe a religion? And I think he just left it there. I don't think he really pursued it the way we but we may be on a collision course, as they keep saying, with the religion clauses of the First Amendment, because it does seem like it's moving towards obsolescence if religion is just this really narrow category of and plus what did the IRS do when they decided to give in to the to Scientology?
Right. I think I see two like solutions, if you will, right? One is the sort of maximalist. I think they both go the same way, which is you classify wokeness and CRT and all that as its own form of religion that cannot be established by a state, and effectively say that public schools need to be math, science, and just don't get to talk about any of this stuff at all, right? Like they don't get to talk about gender, they don't get to talk about race, they don't get to talk about all these like non-falsifiable quasi-religious claims in the same way they don't get to talk about Jesus. Like,
all right, but so the response to that from the people who are in this world is, then you can't, first of all, they're not even reserving their purview to the SAT verbal part, right? To the history and the social studies. They maintain that it has to do that science is white and math is white. So they say Will Chamberlain, whitest guy in the world, notwithstanding Jews are white for purposes of, that we always know, for the purposes of this criticism. Of course you say that. You say, but there's no such thing as no bias. There's no such thing as objectivity. There's no such thing, to which now Michael Knowles comes back into our conversation and says, no, you can use your brain. You can switch it on. You can add 2 and 2 and find out that it's 4. You can get out your your what's it called? The you use to count your
The slide rule?
You got your slide rule, whatever.
Oh, your abacus.
Your abacus, right? Get out your abacus and work it out. You'll see physically the manifestation of 2 and 2 really being 4. We're in a no meaning world. We're in a no meaning world. And that's why you got to get spiritual, Will, because meaning, it's about meaning. Your child is waiting to find out from you and your wife, why, Daddy? Why are we here? Why are we here? You're going to say, well, because we have to, we're here to own the libs.
It's not that compelling. Right. So I think I was going to finish the hypothetical with the alternative, which is we just sort of go along the lines of Kennedy and Carson, and we just work on driving a wedge and expanding this free exercise notion to say, no. We get to teach religion just right alongside this wokeness crap. Right. And you don't get to stop us because, and that's the way that we can inculcate values and fight back on this stuff. And I think either of those is like tenable in the sense that I don't mind the idea of public schools, especially if you run into these problems with establishment religion, just being like, well, guess what? We don't teach history anymore in public school. Like, that's your job. We don't teach social studies. Like, it literally is just a, imagine if you had like
reading
a dictatorship.
And writing and arithmetic.
Right. Yeah. Reading, writing, like a dictatorship that was basically saying, we don't want our children taught anything political that could lead them to contest us. What would the list of things they could learn be in public school? And be like math, science, and whatever. And then you're just like, everything else is up to the parents.
You ever hear the joke, from the old Cold War joke, in the Soviet school system? Here, your assignment today, children, is to write an essay on who was the greatest man in history and why was it Joseph Stalin?
Right. So we can cut that out too, but just limit it. And I think either of those solves the problem. But certainly the problem of, it's just a giant gaping loophole, right? Like all the flowery talk about the desirability of separating church of state, and then wokeness just comes right in the back door and is like putting drag queens in front of your children. Like that is not.
Although,
ideal.
I mean, I think you'll agree that one of the most troubling things that we see in these videos is parents. Yeah. Parents who are taking their children to these events and staying there once, even I'll give them all the credit in the world that they don't really get what's going to happen. Wow.
Yeah, wow. No, it's amazing the power of the current thing.
The power of the current thing, and also of social, I guess that's what makes it the current thing. It will really reflect badly on us if we don't show. Yeah. I mean, your kids are being warped. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about free speech and censorship and stuff. Article 3 project, you're still involved?
Still Article 3 project and IAP, Internet Accountability Project.
And the Internet Accountability Project. What do you think? I mean, are we just all holding our breath to see if it really ends up that, and it looks like it will. And you know why it looks like the deal's going to go through with Musk? Because Coleman hit 200,000 followers on Twitter. They let it happen.
Well, I mean, it's because Twitter hired good lawyers and locked Musk into a contract that he can't really breach.
That I imagine he had some pretty decent lawyers too. But that's right. I mean, it might hurt him. He might feel a little more pain financially than he might. First of all, the value of his assets has plunged spectacularly. Mm-hmm. We should be so lucky to lose as much money to have as much money to lose as Elon Musk has lost in the last 6 months in terms of
gosh, it's still trading at 37. This is crazy. I mean, there's a buy, like I just randomly pulled up the stock to look at it, and I've been following it. I still have been thinking I need to get in on this because it's trading at 37. Not financial advice, by the way. Disclaimer, not financial advice. It's trading at 37, and there's a buyout contract signed at 54. It's like a 50% premium. Like, what? This buyout's going to go through soon, I would think. And that's insane.
That is quite a premium. But you know what? He's done the math based on that price.
Yeah.
And I imagine if you have the liquidity, you can work around that somehow. In other words, you can find a way to, or is the market already baked?
I think, the market is pricing in Twitter agreeing to reduce the buyout price substantially, right? Which I can't imagine they'll do because
No.
they have them under contract at the higher
Right.
price, and
Well,
they would be subject to a lawsuit. The board would be subject to a lawsuit themselves for, for fiduciary issues if they just let them off easy.
Oh no, for sure, but there's no reason
Yeah.
on earth that they would. They, for a million reasons. No, I would, if I were a shareholder of Twitter, I would also be in on that. But
Yeah,
you might think that there might be some kind of escape clause written into it that there's a trigger, and if the stock falls precipitously, all right, that's not your problem or my problem.
mm-hmm.
It does seem, though, that would you agree that across social media, there's sort of a pause in aggressive new censorship activity?
Yeah, it's toned down a bit. I think because
with an election coming up.
There's an election coming up. The vaccine is just not as central to discourse anymore. I think that was the big recent censorship push, was this sort of weird misinformation kills, so we should censor more. And that's not. I mean, COVID's not a central question anymore. The vaccine's not a central question anymore. So suddenly the sort of impetus behind censoring people just isn't, I don't think it's there right at this moment. Not to say that there couldn't be something that hits in the news cycle that suddenly gives the left its new remember misinformation kills, and we'll get more of it. But right now I don't see tons of it. That said, we still need to, you still see people getting banned for frivolous things. We kind of need to take over Twitter like we took over the Supreme Court, and the rules need to change in a similar way, right? Instead of, the people calling for destruction of the Supreme Court should be worried about having their accounts taken down, not the people who say, like Jordan Peterson, who say that, who misgender anybody.
Yes, I mean that would be a welcome change, obviously. I do think that the national the Truth Ministry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hearing. I mean, maybe you're hearing better because you're kind of on the scene. That all that they really did was send it underground. That or maybe it's not getting funded the way it might have been funded, but that they're moving pieces around on the. Are you hearing anything along those lines, or is that just like someone's
moving pieces around? Who's moving pieces around?
In other words, that the Homeland Security is still basically doing it. That it's not going to be the same person leading it, but that it's part and parcel of their intent to manage messaging, and which they supposedly believe is part of their mission to do what was the intention was, which is to have a nationally based misinformation flagging process.
I think they took such a beating, right? Like they're at the head of the organization left. I mean, there might be some people still working on it in DHS, but I suspect that it's one of those things that, they're it's hard to fire civil servants, so you just didn't fire everybody involved. But I suspect that the higher ups there are just kind of not paying attention to it. It's one of those bureaucratic projects that just sits in abeyance until maybe something else happens. That said, if you have some big, again, another COVID type event, not necessarily a virus, but just something that creates a push behind misinformation, I wouldn't be surprised if that kind of gets going again. I just think, I would expect that. My read on this is because that woman left, because the woman who was going to be the head of the organization left, if she felt like there was a reasonable chance to make things work, she would have stayed. And so I think that whatever it is in its current form is probably not particularly effectual, because I think otherwise she wouldn't have just quit her job.
What else do you think is going on in terms of government, message, censorship, that hasn't really bubbled up yet? But
they've got, honestly, I just feel like, I think the fact that we're pretty close to an election here, we're about 4 months out of an election, and they're looking at a titanic, overwhelming defeat. I think that's sort of focused all their energy on how do we not get crushed. You think about something like energy, where they were morons, shut down Keystone XL, closed all the oil leases, gas prices spiked.
Doubling down. I mean, the statements that came out a couple of days ago, Americans are just going to have to buck up.
Oh yeah, get ready to lose by 20, right? Tell it, cause the problem, tell us it's our fault. And I think that honestly, they're
fault
sort
or
of torn between
Putin's fault. Putin's fault.
They're just like they're like, we can't piss off our base, so we can't get rid of the policies we know are causing the problem. So they just, all they have left is like try and do other things, you know, like the gas tax holiday and other various things that, you know, are counter to the environmental goals. But they're you know, Ron Klain is no fool. They know that they're like the gas prices are killing them, and so they're trying to like not look like they're, you know, U-turning on all their environmental policies while still bringing the gas price down somehow. It's not working.
Right. Well, this is, they have this ongoing problem, right? Which is that there's never a limiting principle to any of their visions. So they are incapable of compromising.
Yeah.
Because of the pressure from their activist and donor base, not their base, but the ones who really call the shots. And, you know, it really should lead to their extinction as a party. And it won't, because they've captured so many institutions, but
they're in real trouble. I mean, they could, I think, I mean, we've never seen numbers like this before an election in terms of like generic ballot advantages for Republicans. You know, Biden's approval ratings are abysmal, way worse than Trump's, which is saying something given how ferocious the opposition was to Trump among large segments of society. People are really tired of Biden.
And this is ABC stuff for you and even for me, but explain to listeners why they should not say in response to what you just said, but they cheat in all the elections and therefore it doesn't matter because they explain why that's not the case.
Right. Like, well, you looked at the polls. I mean, again, I'm not a big believer. I believe there was what I call the fraud on the margins explanation, right? There's fraud on the margins versus fraud on the core. Fraud on the margins is stuff like ballot box stuffing, you know, like physical ballot box stuffing, you know, ballot harvesting, mail-in ballot games, like you that sort of stuff, which can slightly increase the vote count for somebody. And so in a close election, like might make a difference, but if you're well ahead, it's not going to. And that's the kind of thing that I think people are right exists and you want to clamp down on in our system. But to assume that all the elections are rigged is just silly. I mean, there's like so many different elections Republicans did win in 20. I mean, we won a bunch of House seats that people didn't expect us to. We won Youngkin in Virginia in 2021. Like, Republicans aren't like shut out of office in the way that they would be if indeed Democrats had complete control of the ballot boxes in such a way that they could just implement whatever fraud they wanted to.
And people forget that the Democrats quite astutely realize they can affect the electoral and Senate votes in a given state by merely distorting voting in one county.
Right.
Especially in, you know, because so, you know, if you make Philadelphia your playpen, you can get whatever result you want in Pennsylvania. That doesn't work in congressional districts.
Yeah, it doesn't work in congressional districts, and it doesn't work if people are paying attention. It doesn't work if results seem really out of line with what's going on elsewhere, right? Like where you have like real big aberrations compared in like one area compared to others, like a uniquely big swing in one. I mean, so they basically, like, there's a reason, you know, they play games where they can, and there's a history of playing games where you can in American politics going all the way back, you know, as Lyndon Johnson in his Senate election in 1948 that he straight up stole. Like, you can go back even further than that. But I think, you know, the way fraud works in this country, you can outvote it, right? Like if there is a margin of fraud that you can exceed. And at which point, like they'll throw in the towel because then there really is, like, if they get caught, they have a really big risk of getting caught and all going to jail for years. So, you know, there's a limit to even what people are willing to tolerate. So I'm optimistic, right? I think we're about to have a very good midterm election, I think, for the Republicans.
I think so too. And I do you think so? You know, now I'm going to say that the next typical response from the sincere but too easily worried listener, which is, Yeah, but then it's going to, but so many rhinos, and they're going to get into Congress, and they're not going to do anything, and they don't really have the nerve, and they're not tough and mean like Democrats. And before I give you the chance to, to swat that softball, I'm going to point out that I spoke to someone last week who told me someone in the world of the big law firms and the big finance in Wall Street, that top people are hearing from Senate Republicans that they've got real plans, serious plans for next year. That you're hearing similar things.
I'm hearing similar things in the House side, actually.
Like
somebody who knows Kevin McCarthy said that Kevin's been radicalized a bit. Not necessarily in the policy sense, but in the I am tired. Democrats need to take a beating next term, because think about all the ways in which Democrats have disrespected Kevin.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a gigantic problem. It's something that I've also been thinking about, and that this is an opportunity for Republicans in the House to really set up a rules regime that is crack proof. Because it's what happened over the last 2 years, or even really 6 years in the House, or was it 4 years, is all right. I mean, it's bad enough that when we did have Republican leadership, they were terrible, but the Democrats did with just the January 6th Select Committee. I mean, everything, you name it, that there's got to be a way to fireproof that, not against them. I mean, at the end of the day, if you lose a majority, then anything, but
there's going to be revenge too. Think about all the people that, they stripped a whole bunch of Republican people of their committees. They're coming back for that, right? Adam Schiff is going to lose his committee assignments in the event the Republicans take power. Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, AOC maybe even are all going to lose their committee assignments. But that's just a start. They look at the January 6th commission. They're like, you want to do a single party commission with subpoena power? We know how to do those too. So you're going to see one on Hunter Biden. You're going to see one. I mean, that's, I think, the next 2 years. It's not a legislative period, right? I think the thing Kevin realizes, and a lot of other Republicans realize, is Joe Biden's going to veto our stuff. We're not going to sit around and pretend that we can just pass legislation. We're here to do oversight, and we're here to do what the Democrats tried to do to us, but we're going to be a lot more ruthless about it. And I think that's what's coming. Which I'm happy about, because, dear Lord, did the Democrats deserve to have real pain for the stunts they've been pulling?
No, I mean, and the stunts that they're pulling, as you put it, they're genuine threats to our system of government, and the lack of pushback from the people who claim to be the guardians of democracy, and and not to mention corruption. I mean, for God's sake. What has been tolerated. And then I guess also in terms of oversight, DOJ, I mean. DOJ's been running wild. And I mean, Merrick Garland needs to be brought in front of Congress and humiliated on a regular basis, if not impeached, frankly. He really should be impeached. I think he's really crossed the.
Yeah, I don't even, the funny thing is, it's I don't see Biden is Biden. It's almost like I don't necessarily see the value in impeaching him unless you can get him on this corruption stuff with Hunter. But Merrick Garland is not doing his job, right? And also personally putting DOJ in these political, DOJ has no business criticizing publicly Supreme Court decisions. You're the Department of Justice. Your job is to prosecute, enforce the law. I mean, that's now the law of the land. It's your now job to obey the law of the land from the Supreme Court. You're supposed to have a good relationship, a working relationship with the Supreme Court, not spitting in their faces. It's nonsense.
The thing about you and me talking, Will, is we could do it all day, but you don't have all day, and even I have to do a little bit of work today. So I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for coming on again.
Of course.
I'm glad everything is great at home, and I hope that you continue to do the things you do, and that we'll hopefully see each other again soon.
For sure. Thanks, Ron.
See ya.